Hello, everyone, and welcome to The R.E.A.L, the real effective answers for life with your host, Tammy and Tara, where we deal with real people, real life, and real answers for the taboo life issues that many refuse to address. And we are so very excited about the discussions planned and pray that with each one, it will bring insight, hope, healing, and freedom as we all remember to keep it real so God can deal and we can heal. Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to The R.E.A.L, the real effective answers for life. And we want to welcome you. I am Tammy.
And I'm Tara.
And we are very excited to begin a new season. God has given new direction. And we're very excited about that direction. As you know, our goal is to, as we often say, keep it real so God can deal and we can heal. And we're dealing with real life, real people, and real issues, and wanting to provide real practical answers for those things that oftentimes many will not discuss. They're considered taboo. And yet the taboo happens. And when it does, we need to know how to handle those things. And we need to know, no matter what, that God is always the answer. But then how do we go about seeking God in those times? And what can we do in the natural when those things happen? And so that is our heart, is to be able to provide those answers as God gives them to us and as He allows us to gain an understanding ourselves. And so again, as I just said, we're kicking off a new season. God kind of redefined the podcast and the direction of the podcast because we really want to deal with a lot of the trauma and the mental health issues that unfortunately are plaguing our society today. And a part of that plaguing, I feel like, is because they're not discussed.
Right.
You're made to, be quiet about it, or, you're not praying hard enough, or you're not believing God, hard enough, or you're not, you're not doing enough good works. If God were real, you wouldn't be going through this. And so those are the things that we want to address, because it is real life. God is real, and He is the answer no matter what you're going through. And Tara, did you want to kind of share about yourself?
Sure. Yeah, so I'm Tara Alston. I am a survivor of trauma, both in my childhood and in my adulthood. When I share my story, I often talk about how I went from abuse to abuse. And so often that's the case with people who do experience traumas in their childhood. But my greatest passion that's come from that God's really instilled in me through that healing journey of what I experienced, is to see others who have gone through hardships and challenges and traumas and abuses to also be able to experience their healing and growth and safety and being able to thrive and walk out their purpose. And so that is why I'm here today.
Yes. And same with me, same, obviously different situations, but also trauma survivor, both of child abuse, marital abuse, spiritual abuse, both mentally, physically, sexually, spiritually. I don't know if I said that or not, and emotionally, but God, and so as God has delivered me, it is my absolute heartbeat to see others delivered. I understand that we've been delivered to deliver.
Right.
And so, as strange as it may sound to some, I now, being on the other side of it, could not say that during the time, but now I honestly can say that I thank God for every tear that He's allowed me to cry, because the more that I come in contact with people, the more that I talk with others that have gone through or going through what I've already been through, I thank God that I can be there for them. I didn't have anyone there for me.
Right.
So I thank God that He's allowing me now to be that source of strengthening or encouragement and comfort to someone else that's going through what I've been through.
Right. Becoming like
yes,
that community that
absolutely,
people need.
Absolutely.
And today we're going to be talking about, I'm really excited about our topic today.
Me too.
And we're going to be talking about caregiver self-care. And what do we mean by that?
You got a mouthful.
So everybody that I know, at least, is in some sort of position where they're caring for others, whether you're a parent. I have 3 kids that I birthed, 3 kids that are bonus children to me through marriage, and then kids that I've adopted into family, maybe not legally or on paper, but they're mine,
Yes.
that I love so much. And so, even as a parent, Tammy, you have 5.
I do, 5 beautiful blessings that I
Yes.
wouldn't trade for the world. Yes, I do.
So we both have experience as parents, being caregivers, but we also at different times have had partners or are currently married, and you have friends that you care for when you see that they're going through different
Absolutely.
things. You might have elderly family or parents that you're caring for, but even things like volunteer work.
Absolutely.
So many people volunteer in things that they're passionate about that often includes caregiving of some sort or
Absolutely.
in employment.
Yes, I think about that with me, especially every day at work. There's not a day practically sometimes that I'm not getting off of the phone and I'm almost in tears because parents that are homeschooling their children for varying reasons and, because their children are being bullied in school or just varying things, even to dealing with parents. And, I just Friday had a scenario where the lady was ready. If she could have took my head off initially, she would have, because it was a billing issue. And I thank God that I've matured to know that sometimes I might get the brunt of the frustration, but I'm not the cause of the frustration. So I was able to separate. And by the end of the conversation, she's thanking me almost in tears because she's divorced single mom of 6. I was divorced single mom of 5. And so I understood. And I immediately, the more that we began to talk, I immediately knew where that frustration had come from. And so I was able to defuse the situation. But just those interactions that just, that's a part of caring. Yes. That's still you pouring into someone else. And you're, and if I don't know, for those of you that understand, what an intercessor is and praying and, sometimes you feel that burden of other people, even if you don't, even if you're not an intercessor, just human nature, the compassion in you. Sometimes you carry that, you carry that.
And I know, so many of us who also did deal with trauma become very empathetic towards others. So you're carrying what other people are feeling because you had to as a survival tactic at one point, but that doesn't just turn off as you're going through your healing journey. But because we're so busy caring for others, oftentimes, it causes us to neglect ourselves. But there's even a personal reward when it comes to caring for others. It's nice to be able to see people's needs be met. Or, if they're under a lot of stress because of something, being able to see some of that stress lift.
Yes.
Seeing a smile on somebody's face that, may have been really having a difficult time. So there is reward that we also feel when we are giving to others and caring about others, but we have to be sure that we are not caring for others at the neglect of ourselves.
Yes, exactly. And then we all have an innate desire to be needed as well. And so sometimes, we give out of that, not necessarily in a selfish way, like it feeds our ego, although that can be a thing as well. Absolutely. But, but in this sense, we all have a need to feel like we're needed, that we're valued, that we have something to give. And we all love being able to do that. You know what I mean? It makes us feel, sometimes it can validate us. And again, all things in right balance, because out of balance is not God.
Right.
But there is when you genuinely love people, there's an innate nature in us to want to feel and know that we're needed, to know that we're making a difference in someone else's life.
Right. And because of that, there's only so many hours in a day.
Yes.
So I know for myself, I have found that, there's so many different areas in my life where I'm being pulled. And so you wake up, you get on this busy schedule of doing all the things that need to be done, caring for all of the people and the things that need to be cared for. And then the day is over. And so then you haven't taken that time to really take care of yourself. And I like, you often talk about how it's biblical.
Absolutely.
To care for yourself.
Absolutely biblical. And one of the things for me, God deals with me very strongly on, as I've previously shared with you, is balance. I feel like sometimes we swing too far left or we swing too far right. And there God is in the middle, bringing the balance that's needed.
Mm-hmm.
And so obviously we're not talking about self-care in the sense that you're selfish and self-absorbed and it's all about me. And if maybe I decide I want to spend time or make time for you, I will. But we're talking about the balance of really realizing that even as it tells us in Ephesians 5, the 28th through 29th verses, God tells husbands to love your wives as yourself. And so it's biblical to love yourself. It's, because you can't truly love someone else until you first learn how to love yourself.
Right.
And so it's biblical, obviously, and that's a whole nother podcast.
Mm-hmm.
There are many men that don't love themselves and women as well. But I mean, in this sense, it's saying this was a direction to the husband. And so that's where you end up with situations where, the wife is abused because the husband in some form or another, in one way or another, when you really get to the root of it, abuses himself as well, or he has very low self-esteem or no self-esteem. Or
vice versa.
Yes, exactly. Mm-hmm. Because women can be just as abusive.
Absolutely.
Just as abusive. And that's another podcast too, because It's not always men. I mean, just keeping it real,
right?
But at the same time, he tells them to love themselves because in the way that he ordained mankind before the fallen nature, before the trauma, before the drama, it was his desire for men to love themselves, not again in a selfish, self-absorbed way, but just in self-care and taking care of yourself. And as God ordained it, no man typically was intended to abuse himself or would typically misuse himself. Not if he's fully surrendered to God and in God and rooted in God and healed. He's not going to mistreat himself. And so that's why God used that analogy, is that a person that's really whole and that's, truly godly and whole and walking in that wholeness, they're not going to mistreat themselves. So they were to treat their wives the same way that he would treat himself. So it's biblical. We read in 1 Corinthians 6:19, where it tells us that our bodies are the temple of the Holy Spirit. Mm-hmm. And so that means that God's Holy Spirit dwells in us. And we almost do God a disservice when we don't take care of our bodies, because it's almost like saying, thank you for my life, but I'm not going to take care of the vessel that you gave me to live my life out in. And it's like, anything, the definition of abuse is the misuse of something in its simplest term. And so whether we realize it or not, sometimes it even gets to, it is that deep that, when we don't do for ourselves, in a sense, we're abusing our bodies.
Right.
We're neglecting our bodies. And God created our bodies. Right. God created our temples. And so it's almost like we're smacking him in the face when we don't take care of ourselves.
Well, and it's really no different. Like if you look at a building, whether it's a church building or a home, if there is not somebody living in there taking care of the building, it starts degrading and collapsing, and the elements beat it down. Yes. And so our bodies being the temple of the Holy Ghost, like that is no different than taking care of the buildings that we live and work and go to church in and all of those things. So it's really important that we're taking care of that vessel so that the things of everyday life don't wear us and our bodies completely out to where we're not functional anymore. We're condemned, boarded up, can't be
no use.
Yes. So we have to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves.
Yeah, and I can remember back, times when I, coming out of church, and you were considered vain if you exercised. It was considered vanity. And I almost want to say that was insanity. Right. Not trying to rhyme, but it did, because it was like, there's nothing vain about taking care of the temple, right? Now, and again, all things in right balance. It's different if you skip in church to go exercise, or, you coming in church and you flexing and
you're not taking care of your conceited,
right? And you're conceited and arrogant, but just to exercise and to take care of yourself, that's God ordained. And I'll just leave this last point as far as like the biblical side of it, although that'll probably be interweaved in our conversation. But it's just, even I think about even in Matthew, the 14th chapter and the 5th verse, and Jesus was, he was, the multitude had gathered to hear him teach and to preach. And, but even Jesus acknowledged, obviously he gave them spiritual food. So he was dealing with the spiritual side or the spiritual aspect of them as human beings. But even he acknowledged and understood that as people, as human beings, flesh and blood, that they also had a physiological need. Mm-hmm. And so that's when he did the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, because he even kind of made reference to that, that he acknowledged and understood that they needed some food too. Right. They were hungry, not only just in the spirit, but that they also needed physical, natural substance or food.
Right. So it's not selfish taking care of those needs that you have.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, in fact, it's foolishness not to.
Right.
It's foolishness not to.
Because as we're neglecting ourselves and neglecting our needs, we can no longer pour out of ourselves what is needed by others to help meet other people's needs. So,
absolutely.
They talk about how you can't pour from an empty cup. And I know before when we've talked about it in conversation, you use the analogy of a car. Like,
yes,
you fill the car up with gas, start with full as you're driving and getting to the places that you need to go. Like, you have to stop and fill the car up with gas again.
Because at some point it's going to stop.
Right.
And you can pray.
Yeah.
And you can and read your Bible and worship all you want to, but that car's not going anywhere.
Right. And it's easy to get caught up in the things that we have to get done and the people that we do help care for. And especially like if you have a heart for others, then you're looking around the world and seeing such real, huge needs, whether
absolutely.
It's a need
absolutely.
for safety, a need for shelter, a need for food. Like, these are all things that we need to survive. So as you're looking around and seeing all of these massive needs, it is easy to get so caught up in going to try to meet these needs that are very real, mm-hmm. That people have. But that's why we grace one another and are able, there's more than one tool in the toolbox. Like,
I was hoping you were going to go there, because I was going to remind you of that analogy that you used.
You're a tool.
Yes.
God is the answer, and
That's
he
it.
supplies our needs, and he's given us the things that we need in this world to be able to supply the needs of others. But we're a tool to use, and there's more than you. There's more than the tool
absolutely.
in that toolbox.
Absolutely.
So when you start like thinking it's all about what you're getting done, that's actually taking the power
away from God.
Yeah, away from God.
And you might want to check your motive.
Absolutely. So
yes.
It's not about you and you having to meet all of these needs. You're used as a tool. So I can take time to allow my cup to be refilled, because I know Tammy, it's like a tag team.
Absolutely.
Tammy is going to be going and doing things and pouring into people, and it's
vice versa.
Yeah, yes. It's a yes. situation to where we need to do what we are called to do in the season that we're called to do it in balance, yes. And allow others to do what they've been called to do, rather than trying to take on Absolutely. The weight of that ourselves, because it's not our weight to carry.
No,
it is our burden to help lift, and it is a situation to where we of course care about what other people are going through, but we have to remember who our source is.
That's real. So very real. And remember that he's God and we are not. And so because he's God, he can keep going.
Right.
But we cannot.
Yeah. He never rests or slumbers.
Exactly.
He's got it.
We, however, need rest. And I could think of, there are numerous scriptures and in varying ways where he tells us to enter into his rest.
Right.
He admonishes us to enter into his rest.
He does.
And that's for the purpose of self-care and replenishing, so that you can go back out and pour out.
And neglecting our needs and neglecting the things that we need to do to take care of ourselves has a major impact. It impacts our physical well-being, our emotional well-being, Absolutely. Mental well-being, spiritual well-being. So it covers, like, we're holistic area. People.
That's it.
And when we don't take care of ourselves, all of those things are impacted. And we see things like us running on empty, feeling completely exhausted. Yes. And I know for myself, I didn't learn that balance soon enough.
Mhm.
So it has had an impact on my health, and I do deal with exhaustion a lot, and do deal with, certain illnesses can come because you are not taking care of yourself and your needs, and just dealing with that chronic stress and chronic trauma. And so as you're working out your healing, and waiting for complete healing, like, we're supposed to be caring for ourselves so that we have time to replenish and have time of peace and sleep.
Absolutely. 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 And it's again dealing with the balance. It's not selfish by any stretch of the word. But then it's also not altruistic, because I feel like, again, there's God in the middle, and sometimes in wanting to help others, it is not biblical when we're helping others. And this was going to your point when you were talking about doing things or trying to do things on empty, because sometimes in our care, in our heart to help others, we can do it to our own detriment.
Right.
And so, it's okay to say no. It is really okay to say no, even in the church, even in church leadership. It is okay to say no, because even in the Bible, and I'm stretching this a little bit, but I honestly feel like it's applicable, and I don't feel like it's in a way that it's taking the word of God out of context. Now, clearly, we know, in the Bible where it talks about God loves a cheerful giver. And in that scriptural reference, it's talking about giving, of your tithe and your substance and that kind of thing. But I feel like it can be applicable even in your service, being a cheerful giver. If you're ushering and where's the joy in that?
Right.
You know what I mean? Go sit down, please, because that's not the someone coming in and they're already heavy and they're already bound and they're already, it's the grace of God that they got to church. And then their first contact is with you, and you're grumpy and you're irritable because you're not taking care of yourself.
Or even in the day to day, all the people that we come across.
Yes. And you're snapping at people and taking their heads off, and you're short and just ugly acting,
And really what it is, if you think about it, it's really stealing from them, because it's stealing what it is that if you had taken the time to replenish and were saying yes to the things that you were supposed to say yes to in this season, and no to the things, whether even if it's something that looks good, if it is not the right time, right place, right purpose, it's not God. It's not God, and it's not time for you to do that. And so if we are not learning when to say yes and when to say no, we're stealing from those that are supposed to be receiving our yes.
Absolutely.
But we were so busy saying yes to the things that were not our portion, that then we don't have what we need to be able to
fulfill what we're supposed to say yes to. And me, I'm like, I don't care. And I don't care what the thing is, even if it's a good thing.
Right.
It could be a wonderful thing, beautiful thing. But if it's not God for you in that season of your life, then it's not good.
Right.
Because it's only going to serve as a distraction to you, which is what you were more or less saying.
Right.
So yes.
And all of these things impact, like we talked about, our physical health, but even with our mental health, it can cause increased stress and increased anxiety, and even get to the point of depression. Not that those things can't be caused by other situations and other things that are medical things that are going on. But it just opens a door for those things to be increased or started in your life when you're not caring for yourself, because we can only handle so much. And we have to remember that it's not about us. It's about what we've been called to, what our place is the tool. The hammer can't be the screwdriver.
Yes.
So if the hammer is trying to be the screwdriver, it's going to end up wearing out, not even fulfilling the purpose that it was created to do.
Because it wasn't given the same burden. And so it may not even be able to carry the same weight because that wasn't its assignment. It
Right.
wasn't its use. It wasn't its assigned use.
Right.
So yes, absolutely. Could not agree more. It brings on, like you said, depression, exhaustion, illness, constant migraines sometimes can be the result of carrying undue stress, which then, or stomach problems, that kind of thing. All of those things can be rooted in not taking care of ourselves and taking on more than what we're supposed to take on. And, I've heard it so many different ways, where people, I've heard people negatively talk about self-care. And if that person's being selfish and self-absorbed, absolutely, it's not God. But when it's in right balance, and we need to understand that it is every bit God. God does not want us functioning. He didn't design us. That's why he told us to take rest on the Sabbath day. That's why he created that, because he knows that in our fleshly nature, we're limited in what we can do. And there's no sense in us rebuking the devil. And there's no sense in us praying. And there's no sense in us, Lord, heal me, deliver me, da, 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 da. And when there's the common sense things, a part of God healing us, delivering us, keeping us, is us using the common sense that he's given us to take care of ourselves. I use the analogy often. It's just like that person that says, God is my protection. God will protect me. And then they go and stand on the train track, train coming full speed ahead, and they're standing there. What do you think is going to happen? Because God's protection for them would have been them using their common sense not to get on those train tracks. And it's the same with taking care of ourselves,
And I know, just like parents, if you have more than one child, you look at one child and you want to make sure that they're not hurting another child. But you also want to make sure that that child isn't hurting themselves.
Absolutely.
And I know that that's how God looks at us. He doesn't only want me to value your life and take care of you when you have a need and I'm able to help fulfill that or able to carry a burden or relieve a stress. He wants me to look at me as his creation as well.
Absolutely.
And coming from my background, that has taken me almost a lifetime to learn.
Yes.
Just because you take on so often what people have told you and how they've treated you.
Their mindset and their ideology becomes your ideology because you don't know any differently until God teaches you. Yes.
And so then you have a hard time caring about yourself because the things that you've heard are ringing through your mind and the things that the way that they've made you feel devalued or not worthy or not good enough. All of those things can come into play when you're trying to learn to care for yourself.
Absolutely.
And when you've come out of situations like that, maybe weren't brought up in a way to know that it's good to take care of yourself.
Absolutely. And especially because in most of those situations, not all, a lot of the times it is out of a misuse of you. It is out of an abuse of you because they don't want you to take care of you because they're too busy draining and depleting you. And how dare you think that you're that important? Or how dare you think that you have the right to rest? I need you to do X, Y, and Z. And that's not, sometimes we got to think about the source of things that are said to us too. And I know for me, it was a deprogramming, because, and I promise you, I just had this conversation with one of my daughters yesterday, and we were talking about that very thing about, when, previous, circumstances where you're taught to not take care of yourself. You're taught to, that it's selfish or it's being arrogant or it's being, conceited if you do take care of yourself. And that's so far from the heart of God.
And there's a quote that I like, and I'm not going to remember it word for word, but it's about unbecoming all of the things that you were not meant to be so that you can become all that you were meant to be in the first place. And it goes along with that because sometimes before we can believe the truth, we have to recognize the untruths that have been spoken over our lives and shown to us. And so as we're healing from the things that we have dealt with and learning how to care for ourselves, some of the things that we can do, a lot of times, spiritually, for instance, a lot of people do find peace in making sure that they are feeding themselves spiritually and are focusing on their spiritual well-being. So whether it's saying a prayer, reading the word, spending time in community with people who believe similarly, making sure that, I don't know, we're growing in that area and taking the time. A lot of people can take the time to do that. But then when it comes to your mental well-being and really needing to be able to kind of just take time to be. Yes. One of the things that I've been really dealing with very recently, actually, is the fact that I have very little downtime that I have been making. And when I have that downtime, I scroll. There's a lot of things that I have followed on social media where it's good stuff. I'm learning a lot. I'm getting a lot of great information, but our brains were not meant to be on 24/7 taking in information.
Constant. Yes.
And I feel like that has been having a big impact on me. So even recognizing that now, part of my well-being needs to be making sure that I just take time to be, whether it is just sitting in stillness, taking a walk out in nature. Everybody has different things that they liked that like brings them peace.
Yes.
Journaling. Getting some of the stuff that you maybe have kept inside out. Yes. So things like that can help our mental well-being as well.
Absolutely. Just, I'm a nature lover too. So yes, the walks, being just as you are intentional, because that word is just like stuck in my head, intentional, just as you're intentional about taking so-and-so to the grocery store, or you're intentional about making sure you make time to counsel with this person, or making time to pray with this person, or
feed your children,
or take care of your husband, or, whatever the situations may be, you need to be equally as intentional about taking care of you. And so it's finding that time of even solitude, whether, like you said, the walks, or whatever your hobbies might be. If you like art, if you like painting, if you like going to the movies, if you like going to see a play, or you like going to the theater, being intentional about you and you time. And it's, if you're married, that spouse being able to say, okay, hey, this is mommy's time. I mean, like literally put it on your planner from this time to this time. This is my time. And if you're married, that spouse being able to say, hey, kids, if you have kids, we're going to go. This is mommy's time. Or if you're just you and your spouse, that spouse giving you your space to do you, as the expression would go, to just do you, and to be able to breathe, and to be able to just get in touch with who you are as a person. I know for me, for years, especially having 5 girls and being divorced and single mom of 5 and whatever, it was a time where I forgot who Tammy was. Things that I forgot. Hey, I really love doing this. I really like, and so being able to now staying in touch with yourself, staying in touch with who you are as a person, because you're more than the title that you carry. Whether that title is mom, whether that title is wife and mom, wife, whether that title is minister, pastor, whatever your title, businessman, CEO, you're still a human being and a person outside of that title. And you need to be in touch with who that person is outside of that title.
And for many of us who have experienced traumas through our childhood, we never even got the opportunity to figure out who we were and what we did like. What do you mean? What is my favorite whatever? Like I had one of my sons, it drove him crazy. He would ask me, what is my favorite, whatever it would be. And I'd be like, I really struggle with favorites. I don't really have a favorite. And so I had to learn about myself, experience some healthy things to determine what it is that I do even enjoy and what I like, so that I can be intentional about those things and make sure that I'm taking time for myself, because I didn't know what replenished me.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
so
absolutely,
even learning that about yourself is part of self-care.
It really is. It truly is. Knowing, because it's, how do you take care of self if you don't know who self is? How do you take care of self if you don't know what it is that helps self to recharge?
Right.
What it is that gives, helps self to, and that's where, solitude, taking time for solitude
Yeah.
and taking introspect and really learning you, so that you can, what is it that makes you happy? Because that's a part of self-care, and you can't do that if you don't know who you are.
Right.
And so, and even, obviously we've been talking about like the psychological, emotional things that you can do, but then also the physiological side, the exercising, making sure that you're eating right, because it makes a huge difference. And then we were talking about that in another conversation, and we were talking about the difference between when you've had a bunch of empty carbs, and then
ton of fast food versus eating
yes.
and getting the nutrients that we need, and taking the time to learn, like, what does my body need, and how does it respond to different foods, and making sure that we pay attention to those things and really nourish our bodies with food, and then allow our bodies to sleep, because that's when we do a lot of physical healing is during sleep, and getting that rest that we need. Learning how to ask for help, which has been a major issue for me.
Yeah.
And
me too.
Some of that people, maybe it's just not part of their personality. Others of us, it's because of different things that we've experienced and the different types of people that we've experienced. So, asking for help is actually feels dangerous because of what we've experienced in the past.
And for me, I'm a combination. It's just not in me. I will give you the shirt off my back, but almost be without a shirt on my back before I ask you for help. So if I ask for help, I need help. And then for me to ask for help, and then, others like that, and then they ask for help, and then everybody and their mother and everybody in the neighborhood knows that they helped you. That's very degrading. That's very, because you don't know what it took for that person to come to you. And then for you to turn around and just flippantly, oh yeah, I helped so-and-so do this, and I helped so-and-so, and if it wasn't for me, they would even be, that's wrong, and, but then that teaches you, okay, I won't ask for help again. You know what I mean? It makes you very leery to ask for help again.
Or those who have either given help without you asking, or once you ask or a need is identified, them helping to meet that need, but then there's strings attached. They want something in return.
Absolutely. And now we're not talking about repayment, where you borrow money, you give the money back. That's the right thing to do if it's within your means, and that's the agreement.
We're talking about exploitation in that sense. And so, all of these different things can cause you to have a difficult time asking for help, but asking for help and knowing who to ask for help,
that part,
who is safe for you to ask for help, is part of taking care of yourself. So that's just as important as eating and sleeping.
It is
knowing those limitations that you have, or the needs that aren't being met, and knowing that you have somebody in your corner, some community, that is there for you, just as you are there for others. And that can really help us with also setting important boundaries that we need to create, which is also part of self-care.
It is
creating those boundaries. And the boundaries aren't necessarily to, it's not walls.
No, it's just, it's actually, it's a barrier. It's not a wall per se, but it is a barrier, and it's keeping out the unhealthy to maintain what is healthy,
and to allow in what is healthy.
Absolutely.
So it's a wall, maybe a boundary with a gate.
Okay, yeah. Put it that way, yes.
And it's having that security that knows who is safe to let in versus who is not.
Yes, love it. Yes.
So all of these things are important in self-care, and just we want to make sure that we're creating a community where people feel safe about talking about these things and learning about these things, and being able to share different successes. And we like to challenge others as we're challenging ourselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then, I think if one thing I would like to leave is just to, and we had mentioned it earlier, also a part of this is physiological, and it's also psychological, But I feel like very key to, mention before ending is guarding your peace.
Yes.
Guarding your peace at all cost. Obviously you don't ever want to exclude someone or be mean or be nasty to anyone. You treat people the way that you want to be treated. But when there are circumstances and people that bring stress into your life, and it's a constant source of stress, a constant source of strife, you may have to love them from a distance, and it's okay to do that. I think for me, more than anything, I have learned, even with church, because I was so programmed that if you say no, you're being selfish. If you say no, you're being disobedient to your leadership. If you say no, you're doing, and it's like, no, because God is first and foremost, and no one, I don't care who it is, pastors included. And I love my pastors with all my heart. So certainly not implying them. I'm saying it in general.
Right.
No one takes the place of God in his voice in your life. They may come in alignment with what God has already said. They may come in agreement and they help you fulfill the will of God for your life, but they don't take the place of God in your life.
Right.
And if God himself tells us to enter into his rest, if God himself is saying that we have to take that time of self-care to make sure that we're doing okay mentally, right, to make sure that we're doing okay physically, I'm going to do my best to explain it to you. But if you choose not to understand that my physical well-being, my mental well-being is more important than maybe what it is that you're wanting me to do, then I have to leave that with you and God.
Right.
But I've got to take care of myself, and I've got to guard my peace at all cost, because we only have one body.
Right. And that's like we were talking about people who misuse.
Yes.
There's going to be people who are never okay with you taking care of yourself.
Absolutely.
So part of your self-care is also coming to that understanding and having peace about that.
Absolutely.
That it is okay for you to take care of yourself, even if there is a situation where people are not happy about that.
Exactly.
So we challenge you this week to see what areas that you can increase your self-care or maybe start something new.
Yes. And we're going to challenge each other. We're going to keep each other accountable.
Yes.
So we'll let you know what our what our changes were.
And we'd love to hear from you. So if you'd like to email us, you can reach us at neverthelessistand@gmail.com. Or we'd be happy to see your comments and correspond with you via social media platforms as this is playing. So we're just excited to hear about what this does in your life, hopefully bringing some sort of freedom or increased focus or more intentionality, just as it's doing for us.
So, absolutely. To take care of, to intentionally, deliberately, with purpose, with an expected result, take care of you. And I think, above all things, and as always, too, we want you to always make sure that you keep it real
so God can deal.
And we can heal.